Zabel, who was the president of the Board of Trustees when the project first got underway. He could not be here today because his son was married on Cape Cod last night, and I was privileged to co-officiate in that wedding ceremony. And I suppose I can add, Marlene and I got up at 1:30 this morning to bring those greetings back to you. So bear with me. We used to tell the preaching class, the one thing worse than a congregation falling asleep during your sermon is if you fall asleep during your sermon. But you have no idea how unique you are. I'm not talking about your cleverness or your hair color or the way you walk or talk. I'm talking about you as a community of faith. I could say we as a community of faith, but I'm really more focused on, interested in, this morning in my remarks, you all, the people of this congregation. Here we are this morning from a variety of stories and traditions and pasts and points on the compass, gathered again freely with our own particular hurts and joys to worship God and be together. And we're here because this has been going on for a long time, right here, about 110 years. It all began with 12 families who had an inspiration. They wanted a church, for that time unique, free of denominational authority, where they could worship and serve together in spite of, as they put it, minor differences of belief. And only in America, because here, more than almost any other country, we enjoy the freedom to associate and worship according to the dictates of conscience without interference either by church authority or state power. And this fundamental freedom brought many of the first settlers to this country, even if they realized it imperfectly. This fundamental freedom is enshrined in the very first of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And yet, you know, this freedom remains a rare exception to the human condition in vast reaches of our world today. Police in Algeria recently arrested 16 people, imprisoned them for the possession of Bibles. All the churches in a state of Nigeria have been declared illegal and 17 of them demolished. Freedom House now releases documents establishing that a special bureaucracy has sprung up in Vietnam to deal severely with anyone who has illegal beliefs. In China, the government is quite ruthless in attempts to stamp out a spreading house church movement. You see, what we take so for granted here, Sunday after Sunday and other days of the week, would cost us life and limb in other countries and cultures. There are those who argue that this freedom we enjoy, the freedom to assemble and worship, is the foundation of all our other freedoms. Certainly to our freedom as a people can be attributed the energy to which we've built an economy and a culture of affluence and well-being. But to our freedom can be attributed also the reality that we're one of the most religious people on the face of the earth. For authentic faith thrives best when it is not a matter of conformity or coercion, as it's been in Europe for centuries, but where the individual is challenged to associate and participate voluntarily, as is the case among us. Consider the fact that only 5% of Germans, according to the latest polls there, indicate that they are believing church members. 5% in the land of Luther. Frankly, I don't know another place in the world where the senior minister could go away for 5 months and leave it to staff and people to raise $3 million and totally renovate the whole church. But they kicked me out of my office, so why not? So the freedom we enjoy, friends, is one of the most precious gifts of God. But the open and critical question always before us as a people is how we respond to that freedom. Because freedom is no guarantee of responsible lives. By definition, it allows us to indulge in hedonistic and self-centered ways, uncaring and indifferent to the common good, or the creation of a better future for all our people. Freedom involves the freedom to destroy our freedom. The danger of freedom is the danger that we will take it for granted, that we will lapse into a sense of entitlement, that we will assume that its gifts establish our superiority on the face of this earth. So you hear Moses saying a long time ago to his people who are about to go into a new land and enjoy their peace and freedom, be careful lest when you come into the land and build fine mansions and buy fine motor cars and grow fine portfolios, you say, my brains and my labor have gotten me all this. For who is it that gives you strength and life to get all these? Well, that's sort of what he says, but look it up. Deuteronomy chapter 8. Am I wrong that the past 20, 30 years or so has seen a growing sense of entitlement among many? And I don't mean those on the lower rungs of the economic scale. So rather than thank God for what we do have, we so easily slide into a kind of defensiveness, self-justification, assertion of entitlement. I deserve this. I have worked hard for what I have earned it. When one man of substance some time ago proclaimed to everyone about that he was self-made, Mark Twain responded, thank God, you've just relieved the Almighty of a grave responsibility. But this rarely solves the problem, because we all know somewhere deep down inside of us, do we not, that there's no way that we have truly deserved the unbelievable gifts that have fallen upon us. Of course we've worked hard, but I know quite a number of people scattered around this world who've worked far harder than I have and who have scarcely enough to keep themselves going. And they're more virtuous than I am, and they're often brighter. And what sheer good fortune it was that I was born in this land and to these parents. And what a wonderful providence it was that brought me to my wife and my children and my church and my community. I didn't dream it. I didn't plan it. I can't pretend it is finally much of my own doing. One of the most successful golfers in the world, as I'm sure you know, is Gary Player. He was born into abject poverty in South Africa, recalls his childhood as one of loneliness and pain and adversity. His mother died when he was 8. His father worked long hours in the mines. We were so poor, he says, that I used to take off my shoes whenever I could so that they would last longer. After years of backbreaking practice at the game of golf, he turned professional in 1953. He won more than 150 tournaments. He earned millions of dollars. Though he was clearly successful, Player was always careful never to forget the real source of his success. In his own words, golf is the talent God loaned to me. You have no idea how often I get down on my knees in sheer gratitude. The attitude that we're entitled, the assumption that we have it coming to us, only leaves us self-centered and insensitive, explaining the misfortune of others by some suspected flaw of character or weakness of will. And more important, it shuts off the springs of humility and generosity. So easily we fall into presuming upon, taking for granted, seeing as our just due the incredible good fortune that we have enjoyed in this good land. Or there's envy. If ever there was a culture of envy, ours is one. Those who, out of an attitude of entitlement, don't have what they feel they deserve, get caught up in a spiral of envy. Envy of the affluent, the beautiful, the thin, the famous, those who seem on the surface to have it made. Envy promoted by commercials and politicians and media. And it's not just the have-nots. The late Henry Fairley comments that one of the most destructive forms that envy takes today is the widespread assumption among us that everyone should be able to do and enjoy everything that everyone else can do and enjoy. People who have been heretofore quite content in their own natures are suddenly persuaded that they've been missing something. No society of the past has so assiduously taught people to envy. focus on our own self-justification or on what is missing. They both leave us stuck in ourselves, unable to truly embrace a life of peace and joy. And the only antidote, the only salvation, I think, is a better and more liberating attitude and mood. The only way you deal with a bad mood, you know, a destructive mood, is by displacement, by substitution with one more productive and affirming. And that is what the attitude, the mood of gratitude, is really all about, and why an old faith appeals for it time and time again. But think about the last time it landed on you. And I'm sure it has, unexpected perhaps, but powerfully, when the day turned surreal in its beauty, or a lucky break came your way, or love came back to a stale relationship, or you were involved in some meaningful endeavor to which so many gave so generously, and Thanksgiving just kind of popped up, welled up in you, unbidden, spontaneous. Remember it? Didn't it really sort of take you out of yourself and your worries? Didn't at least for a moment break the cycle of anxiety, the fixation on petty hurts and minor deficits in your own life? Didn't it evoke a much more joyful and generous spirit? Don't be anxious, give thanks, writes the apostle, and the peace of God will reign. So how do we get it? This attitude of gratitude with sufficient depth and power that it really does sustain us, carry us along. Well, I think one thing is certain: we do not become grateful by command. If I say to you with all the authority in me as your minister, you ungrateful folk, you ought to be more thankful for all you have, what do you feel? Grateful? Hardly. Defensive? Guilty? This is why we call it a grace. It can't be coerced. It has to sort of happen to us. But there are some things we can do to set the stage for it, to make us a little more open to it. For one thing, we can make it a habit to deliberately pay attention to the good gifts when they do come along. This is what we're doing today, isn't it? This is why we call gratitude a grace. We're lifting up the gifts of leaders and people who have generously offered themselves to us and our future. One woman whose life had become a pathetic mixture of dissatisfaction, fear, bitterness, misery writes, I made a vow one day that every night I would begin my little prayers by trying to list all the things for which I'm grateful, little things that happened during the day which added to its happiness. And it's become a habit of mine now, and it's geared me to pick out the good things and let the rest of it go. The fact that for some time I've not had a single bad day and have refused to be downhearted with anyone is truly marvelous to me. And I could tell you 100 stories through time of people who have found that way. But I think there's something much more profound at stake here, and that is not whether we can find things to be grateful for, certainly we can, but whether we can learn to understand life differently, understand life, all of it. The sheer privilege and miracle of being here this morning with all the joys and tragedies around, the good and the hard, as an incredible gift. Not just not something to grasp at. Life itself in all its complexity and confusion, its ebb and flow, embraced in joy and sorrow on days of ease and days of struggle as a gracious gift from God, calling for tender care of one another. I really think we may be relearning this a bit as a people these days. Life is not something we can secure and guarantee, but it is a most precious gift that we can greet with gratitude. There's been a lot of sorrow, but there's been a lot of learning too, that it's good that we are here. Matthew Arnold writes, is it so small a thing to have enjoyed the sun, to have lived in the light of another year, to have thought, to have loved, to have done? Is it so small a thing? You see, the Apostle Paul writes this very first letter in the New Testament to a little band of Christians who've only been together for a year or so, called together by a strange new word about a gracious and loving God. And Paul is stuck down in Corinth, several hundred miles away, and he's worried about them. You know, they're rather new at the game, called faith, former Jews, some pagans, a mixture of classes and races, bossy men, uppity women. Are they getting along? Are they still there and at it? Respect your leaders, everybody who's working hard. Live at peace with one another. Be patient. Aim for what is best for all. Be joyful. Smile. Pray. You see, what is at stake here is whether an infant Christian community can so live that the world around it will see it as a new kind of community, a community of life and hope and future and inclusion, and be drawn to them and to their God. And friends, that's always what is at stake, not what I say from the pulpit or you say on a street corner to a stranger passing by. The witness of this congregation is in the reality that we know by the grace of God to live together, to get along together, to work together, to love together. It's a laboratory in how the world ought to be. But then to his friends in Thessalonica who are suffering severe persecution and oppression, who do not enjoy the freedom and comfort that is ours, which is the natural state of the church, give thanks in all circumstances. Whatever happens, give thanks. You see, here's the conviction that in everything that happens to us, there is some gift that God wants to give us. So he can call us to embrace all of life every day as a gift, worthy of grateful and generous hearts. Thanksgiving for whatever happens. Because this is the truth about life. We do not really know what may turn out to be God's gift to us tomorrow. We do not. Often something we might turn away from in disdain or disgust or fear turns out to be an incredible blessing. And often what we would seek and choose if only we could, if we had the choice, might very well prove to be our undoing. I cannot tell you how many times over the years some friend who has experienced defeat or failure or infirmity or reversal has come to me later and has said, "You know, Gil, that was the best thing that ever happened to me." Frederick Buechner, in a little piece called A Room Called Remember, reflects on King David's eternal gratitude to God, and then he says this: "We have survived, you and I. For 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, or 80, we have made it to this day. We needn't have made it. There were times we never thought we would and nearly didn't. And each must speak for himself, for herself. But I can say for myself that I've seen sorrow and pain enough to turn the heart to stone. Who hasn't? Many times I've chosen the wrong road, or I've chosen the right road for the wrong reasons. Many times I've loved the people I love too much for either their good or mine. And others I might have loved, I've missed loving and lost. I've followed too much the devices and desires of my own heart, as the old prayer has it. Yet often when my heart has called me to be brave, to be kind, to be honest, I've not quite made it. To remember my life is to remember countless times when I might have given up, gone under, when humanly speaking I might have gotten lost beyond the power of any to find me. But I didn't. I have not given up, and each of you, with all the memories you have and all the tales you could tell, you also have not given up. You also are survivors and are here today. And what does that tell us, our surviving? It tells us that weak as we are, a strength beyond our strength has pulled us through at least this far, at least to this day. Foolish as we are, a wisdom beyond our wisdom has flickered up just often enough to light us, if not to the right path through the forest, at least to a path that leads forward, that is bearable. Faint of heart as we are, a love beyond our power to love has kept our hearts alive. So give thanks, whatever happens, in all circumstances, for this is what God wills for you in Christ Jesus, and in His will is your peace. Amen.